What's going on, everyone? We have the final tier list for set 12, but because there was a crazy patch, there's actually some new comps out there that we have not played before, which is pretty interesting, along with a bunch of changes that we're going to go through right now. So starting off in the S tier, we have Multistriker Reroll. They buffed Akali so she could support the other Multistrikers a lot better, but you mainly go for Kassadin carry or do like a Ashe Jax. So it's pretty much the same comp from before, but better right now because Akali's better. Ahri Bastion is still a go-to reroll comp. Ahri's overall pretty solid. Bastions are very popular right now. And speaking of Bastions, we have the new comp, Fast 9 Bastions, which is very interesting to play around Xerath carry and getting 8 Bastions in. 8 Bastion has always been good in this set, but it's finally one of those patches where it's reliable to go for. Witchcraft, if you get the Witchcraft emblem, Witchcraft Ryze is very, very strong. And speaking of Ryze, we're going to round out the S tier with Ryze Flex, of course, the premier 4 cost right now. In the A tier, we have a bunch of those like wacky augments that are going to be really, really good. But before that, we still have Mage Reroll. The comp got nerfed a little bit, but it's still overall pretty solid. Before the hero augments, Spider Queen Elise, High Horsepower Lillia, and Zap Attack Blitzcrank are all doing very, very well right now. We can see them as some of the top comps up here. 4.09 High Horsepower Lillia, 4.15 Spider Queen, and then 4.25 Zap Attack Blitzcrank. All very good stuff. And then we also have the 2 tanky Kogmaw Reroll as a solid go-to, and then Chrono got buffed again, 6 Chrono specifically. So if you are able to get the Chrono Karma going, it's kind of like the Exodia Chrono Karma from before, if you remember that. After that, we have Jinx Wukong, got a bit nerfed, dropped down a little bit, and the same thing happens to Portal Ryze. I think Ryze, Ryze is played in too many different comps right now, but if you get a Portal Spatula, you can still hard force Portal Ryze. It's just a little bit more difficult than it was previously, but still very, very good comp. I would recommend hard forcing Portal if you get Portal Crest at the start of the game, and if you have any amount of Portal units to support it. Shapeshifter Flex is going to be the next comp. This is kind of similar to some Fast 9 comps, because you rely a lot on Briar and Smolder. Faerie Kalista still a solid go-to. Eldritch if you get the spat. Karma Gwen Fiora if you get a ton of items, play that. Deja Vu Galio, okay. Warwick reroll still viable. Spin to win Wukong, just another version of Jinx Wukong. Sugarcraft viable, but depends on the portal. Arcana Veris, decent, but not as good as Ryze. And then Blaster, Vanguard, Ezreal Hui, still playable. Pyro Veris, same thing as the other Veris. And lastly, Reroll Veigar is going to round out the A tier. So we're going to go over how to play every single one of these comps. But first, we have a quick word from our sponsor of today's video. I absolutely need to tell you about Marvel Strike Force, where the Marvel Universe comes to life in this dynamic squad-based tactical RPG. Download it now for free using this QR code on the top or from the link in the description below. Unlike most games where the meta stagnates, Marvel Strike Force constantly involves with campaigns, blitz, arena, and yes, there's also an alliance war where we can play in weekly battles or go head-to-head with other players in the tournament. We can recruit heroes and villains from the multiverse to make strong competitive teams. What's crucial for that? Synergies are crucial. Whether you want to assemble the Avengers, play with the X-Men, or any other Marvel superhero, team composition and synergies are no strangers to us at all. Assemble balanced teams to unlock every hero's true potential. New players right now can unlock 17 total characters in the first 30 days, including Spider-Man, Captain America, Thor, and my personal favorite, Deadpool. This month alone, there is a brand new game called Battle World. Battle World is an exciting new PvE mode where you can practice alongside your alliance. If you're a new or returning player, be on the lookout for awesome rewards to celebrate Battle World's launch. But right now, there's even more to celebrate this spooky season. Players can redeem the code Halloween to get 100 bonus shards for Zombie Iron Man, 600,000 gold, and 480 L2 training modules. So downloading the game today using my QR code or the link in the description, and also grab a friend to do so as well so you all can play together. All right, let's talk Multistriker. A lot of people are playing Multistriker Reroll right now because it's just so reliable and very easy to play. It's by far, like, in terms of strength plus difficulty, it's just like the best ratio of that right now. And that's why I recommend most people to play this comp no matter what rank you are, whether you're low rank, high rank, something in between, and go for mainly the Kassadin reroll or the Jax and Ashe reroll. Hecarim is still doable, or even playing around Kalista, but you mainly want to focus on the reroll versions. And you could even morph a version of all 3 of these together if you get all the units. But for Kassadin, his best items are just going to be the Bloodthirster, Titans, and Quicksilver. There are other combinations you can run with this that work, but In terms of reliability, that's what the top players are choosing right now. But obviously, like Edge and Knight can replace Quicksilver. You could put in a Rage Blade to scale. Hand of Justice can be used as a healing thing. Archangels for damage, along with a lot of other wacky combinations, including some artifact items. Artifacts are obviously extremely good on Kassadin. Any of the ones that give stuff like AP, survivability, or attack speed are going to be preferred. After that, I put utility items on Shen, such as Ionic Spark and Sunfire Cape, but you could also put like a Static Shiv on your Ashe or Kalista in the back, and then throw all your leftover items on Akali. You definitely want to be prioritizing Kassadin, not so much the Akali, but Akali is a lot stronger right now, so you could work around that. If you're doing the Ashe reroll version, I like getting red buff on her and Runons. I think those are her two best items. Rage Blade's also pretty solid. And then for your Jax, throw some tank items on him plus an Even Shroud. And you could even play like Ashe 3 and then get a Kassadin 3 after that. I do recommend trying to get to 7 Multistriker as fast as possible though, after you do get whatever 3-star you have. But let's say you complete your Ashe 3 and then you have maybe like 7 copies of Kassadins that you picked up before. Like just finish the Kassadin and then go for 7 Multistrikers after that. But yeah, 1 or 2 cost reroll for this comp. Very simple to play and nothing too much complicated going on there. Next comp up we have is Ahri reroll. Ahri reroll was very dominant last patch, still good this patch too. You want to play it around with like 4 Bastion 4 Scholar or 6 Bastion 2 Scholar. Most people are doing the 4 Bastion 4 Scholar combo. And there's also like the Vanguard version, which is pretty solid but a bit rarer to do. It's much easier to play around the top version because you could get 3 stars a lot easier. And that way when you Arcana your Ahri, you get a lot more ability power because her Arcana bonus is based on how many 3 stars you have. And the more you have, the more ability power that you get from that. But in terms of alternatives to the comp, again, I said you could do the 4 Bastion 4 Scholar, but you could also do 6 Bastion. All you do is take out Ryze and Milio and just add in any 2 Bastion units. For example, like Nunu, Shen, and obviously if you get Diana, replace someone with Diana. That way you get the 6 Bastions lined up and ready to go. Next comp up we have is going to be the Fast 9 Bastion. This comp is the new comp on the block, so there are very strong requirements for this comp. So you need to have +1 Bastion emblem so that you could reach 8 Bastion. You cannot get to 8 Bastion without a +1. And after that, you also need a lot of economy. But if you do get this comp, like you will win the game. Even with like a 1-star Xerath, it destroys a lot of teams because the Bastion frontline just doesn't die. Diana can scale with Archangel's Bloodthirster. Again, she doesn't die. And then Xerath casts a couple times, like who cares, right? He'll scale again with the Archangels. Archangels is very important in the Bastion comp because the game's going to go for a long time, so you want to stack up as much ability power as possible. Milio is also very good. It's just like one of those traitless units that you run because 1, it's a legendary unit, and 2, because the fight lasts a very long time, Milio can throw a lot of items onto everyone. And they can make decent use of them because they're not going to die in the front line because 8 Bastion gives a lot of armor and magic resistance. For tank items, you don't need pure tank items in this build because again, you get all the tankiness from the traits. So for your like quote unquote main tank like Taric, you could just throw all your utility items on him, such as like a Redemption, Sunfire Cape, and Ionic Spark, and he'll get a ton of value through those items. I recommend playing this on like a econ portal such as like Scuttle Puddle or Gold Opener, or if you get like some insane econ augments such as like Level Up, Patient Study, Tiniest Titans, Late Game Specialist, things like that, because you really do need a ton of gold to get this comp going, and sometimes you need to roll at 8, sometimes you roll a bit at 7 to stabilize early on because you want to get a lot of your Bastions going, plus whoever you use as a temporary carry. But lucky for you, you could use the previous comp, the Ahri Bastion, as kind of like a base board to go for the Fast 9 comp. So you could play like the Bastions plus like Zoe or Ahri as your item holder, and then if you get a lot of Ahris, go for the Ahri comp. But if you don't and you have like a lot of gold, save up your gold instead of rolling and go for a Fast 9 instead. Very powerful comp. I highly recommend everyone try this out at least one time on this patch because it's super, super cool. Next comp up we have is Witchcraft, Fiora, and Ryze. So if you get Witchcraft Spatula or Witchcraft Emblem, it's one of the best performing emblems right now at 3.99, which is obviously very, very good, right? So what people do is that they play 6 or 8 Witchcraft. If you get 2 of them, you go to 8, and you just throw that onto your Ryze, throw a red buff or Morello on him, and just itemize your Fiora as you normally would. And it's just a very powerful comp. It's the same thing as a Karma Fiora comp of the past, except you just use Ryze instead because he's just an OP unit right now. He's just the best 4 cost. And he fits in with a comp because he's Get Scholar from Zoe, who is Witchcraft and Scholar. So kind of like a no-brainer standard leveling Fast 8 comp. Pretty solid to play if you have the Witchcraft Spatula. I wouldn't play this otherwise, but if you do get it, it's super, super strong. Next comp up we have is Ryze Flex. This is finally the first comp we see where you could go for if you have like a regular game going. And obviously, if you are leaning into the Ryze items, you could go for this build. So this one's built around Preservers and Scholars, but the most popular version is going to be the 4 Preserver, 4 Scholar comp that we see here. There's also the Arcana version, and there's even a Bastion version. You pretty much just copy the Bastion boards that we saw in the previous images, and instead of having your Ahri carry, you just have your Ryze carry instead. But very solid comp, very high flexibility. If you're a bit of an experienced player, I recommend going for this comp if you really want to master something. All you have to do is find some sort of main tank. Most cases, it's going to be Rakan. Throw all your tank items on him, and then throw the same items you've always thrown on Ryze throughout the entire set, which is going to be 1 anti-heal item and 2 AP items. Sometimes you use an attack speed item as well. Really depends on what items you're getting that game, but just slam items early game, just because it helps you preserve HP, which is really helpful to do whenever you try for a fast 8. I'll probably do like an instructive how to fast 8 video in the next set, because this set's kind of winding down a bit. It is the last patch after all, and I think a lot of people play fast 8 wrong, because I've watched a bunch of people play and they always fast 8 when they're not supposed to, and then they reroll when they're not supposed to. But speaking of reroll, we have reroll mages down here. The comp did get nerfed a bunch, but Soraka and Seraphine are still very solid go-tos right now. And because it did get nerfed, it also means fewer people are going to be contesting you, so that's some good news as well if you are interested in playing this comp. It's just a simple 1-cost reroll though. You go for Soraka and Seraphine 3-star. Sometimes you could get away with not getting both of them to 3-star, but in most cases, I'd say like maybe 70% of the time, 78, you do go for both of them. It'd have to be some weird circumstance where you get like none of the other one. Like let's say you get a Soraka 3 and then you only have 2 copies of Seraphine. It's happened before, right? But in those cases, yeah, probably just level up instead and go for Vex or go for Nora. But tank items on Vex, solo frontline the Vex. You could Yumi up Vex, Soraka, or Seraphine. Any of them will do. Just make sure in this build that you have some sort of magic shred. So you get that from the Ionic Spark, which is this item over here. Or you could get it from a static shiv in your back line. And Nami's a pretty good support unit in the late game, so I like using her as my like tertiary item holder, or like the 4th one, whatever I don't know the word. But next comp up we have is Spider Queen Elise, the first hero augment that we're going to cover. What do you want to do with this comp? You just want to play a bunch of shapeshifters to complement Elise, and she will just carry. So do a 1-cost reroll, get Elise 3-star, power level after that, throw as many shapeshifters in as possible. If you get a shapeshifter +1 emblem, you could go for 8 shapeshifter, and you'll probably win a lot of games that way. If you don't and only have 6 shapeshifter, you'll probably get top 4 very easily. This comp is averaging what, like a 4.09 or something like that when we last checked, and pretty much all you have to do is just hit Elise 3, which is very easy to do because this augment gives you 3 copies of the unit. But you can see the placement distribution right here. Like, it's very good, gets a lot of seconds. Pretty nice stuff. Like, win rate is pretty average, honestly, like 12.61. Like, the average is 12.5, which is just 100 divided by 8. But getting top 4 is super, super duper easy with this comp. And if you get 8 shapeshifter, like, I don't see how you're not winning a lot of games, especially if you get like a carry in the backline such as Smolder. But sometimes you could run something like a Namzi and do like an Elise Namzi carry game. So lots of different options here, and very powerful hero augment, probably the strongest. Next one up we have is High Horsepower Lillia. This is pretty much just going to be the Ahri board we saw from before, but you just do 6 Bastion always. Before, with the Ahri comp, you do like either 4 Bastion, 4 Scholar, or 6 Bastion, 2 Scholar, but with Lillia carry, you just do 6 Bastion all the time, and you just do the same exact comp as before, except you have a second carry. And it makes the comp a lot easier to play because while you're re-rolling for Ahri 3, you have the Zoe 3-star just absolutely demolishing the early to mid game. And yeah, pretty easy to play comp. Don't really need to talk about that one too much. Zap Attack Blitzcrank, very solid comp right now. And people are playing it mainly with the Veigar version. You go Honeymancy and Veigar, or you could also do Ziggs. Ziggs fell off a little bit this patch, but honestly, you could do either version. They're both pretty solid. It just depends, as with every game of TFT, on what champions you're hitting, what units you're hitting. If you're hitting a lot of Ziggs, go for Ziggs 3. If not, level up after you get Blitzcrank 3 and go for Veigar. So it's going to really depend on what's happening in your game, but 1-cost reroll for Blitzcrank or Ziggs, and then 3-cost reroll for Veigar. Just make sure if you are playing the Veigar version to do the 3 mages so that you activate your Veigar. But all in all, this comp is super, super, super strong. Very easy to play too. You just have to make one decision. I will say it is more difficult than the Spider Queen Elise and High Horsepower Lillia, because Spider Queen Elise, you pretty much go like all the shapeshifters and you just put it in your team planner and you don't really have to think after that. High horsepower Lillia, again, put all the Bastions in your team planner and then put Ahri in, and then you don't have to think after that. But this one, you have to make one decision. You have to decide whether you're going for Ziggs or Vanguard, and sometimes even Kogmaw. But as with most hero augments, they are just very easy to play. So if you are a beginner and you see these augments offered to you at the start of the game, they're so good right now that I would just auto pick them, and you'll probably do fine in a lot of cases. Obviously, ideally, you want to have like a lot of copies of whatever unit you're going for. Like if you have Zap Attack Blitzcrank, ideally people take this at like higher levels when they have like Blitzcrank 2-star already. That way, when they pick the augment, they have 6 copies of Blitzcrank. But if you're a beginner, you could probably just click the augment and do just fine by putting everything into the team planner, as long as you execute 1-cost reroll correctly. Next comp up we have is Kogmaw reroll. People only play this with the 2 tanky version, which is up here. Sometimes people play it with the hunters, but it's really not played that often there. Mainly the power comes from the 2 tanky comp. So this comp is S tier when it's 2 tanky, and maybe B tier when you're doing the hunter version. That's why I have it in the A tier right now. I'm probably gonna make a separate section in the new set for all these comps that are reliant on hero augments, where if you get them, it's like S+ tier, and if you don't, like you don't even play the comp. But I try to have that here in like the Exodia comps. For example, like 6 Chrono Karma, it's a rare comp to play, but if you get 6 Chrono, you win a lot of games. It's actually disgusting. It's just very hard to do because you need a legendary unit and you need an emblem. But that's going to be the comp we're going to talk about next. But first with Kogmaw, just make sure you have the 2 tanky augment when you play this, and just run multiple copies of all the Honeymancy units. So Blitzcrank, Nunu, and Kogmaw, those are going to be the ones that you're going to be playing duplicates of. Play a hunter so that you complement your Kogmaw, and then you could add in a Rumble if you want. He's kind of optional, but if you're running Blitzcrank as your main tank, Rumble's nice because he gives him Vanguard, so that just is there to make your Blitzcrank a lot stronger. But tank items on Blitz, AD caster items on Kogmaw because he casts a lot, so you want the Spear of Shojin, getting attack speed to your team, and then IE Last Whisper, nothing too complicated there. Next comp up we have is Chrono Karma. Again, this is a very weird comp because you need to meet 2 requirements. You need Chrono Emblem, which is uncraftable, so you can't just get a spatula and then make it, or get a pan and make it. Instead, you can pretty much only get it from either an augment or like some random emblem effect. And then after that, you still need to hit Camille. So there's a lot of things that you need working your ways. You can't just like go level 8 and pray you get a Camille. Sometimes you have to go level 9 to kind of guarantee it. So if you're on a high econ portal such as Gold Opener or something like that, and then you get a Chrono Crest at the start of the game, it's going to be a lot easier to play and a lot better. That way you could reach level 9 quite easily, and you have the Chrono Emblem already at the start of the game. But just itemize your Karma and Camille. Those are going to be the main carries. If you do have a Morgana, she's going to be the best user of the Chrono Emblem, but before that, you could just put it on anyone else, and that's pretty much all there is to this comp. Next build up we have is Jinx Wukong. It's still very powerful if you hit it 3-star. It's just one of those high risk, high reward comps as with every 3-cost reroll. So if you do get this comp setup, you're going to do really well. Wukong in the front with the stone plate's always going to be his best item. Get as many as you can on him. If you can't get 3, that's fine, but at least have 1, you know, and preferably 2. Jinx in the backline, the 2 items that I think are non-negotiable are Rageblade and Runon's. Third item can pretty much be anything, but I'd say the first 2 are pretty mandatory. After that, you do want some sort of armor penetration effect. Some people are going to say, doesn't Jinx ignore armor? Part of her damage does, and also Twitch does give armor penetration built into his kit. However, Twitch often dies because he's a 1-cost unit, so you can't really rely on him for armor penetration. And Jinx, while she does have armor penetration, you could check the data because it's still good to have armor penetration on a unit because she only ignores 50% of an opponent's armor. And against super tanks, it's very useful to have that additional armor pen. So we could look up Jinx, put her as 3-star, put in Wukong 3-star as well, just to make sure we're playing the same build. It's 3.61 because you have 2 3-star 3-costs, so obviously the data does have some assumptions to it. Like, you're always going to do well if you hit both of them 3-star, right? But if we look at Last Whisper, it's like a 3.66, which is very good still, right? Like yeah, it's a bit worse than the average of 3.61, but it's still a very fine item. That's why most people put the Last Whisper onto the Kogmaw. And if we add Kogmaw to the Explorer here, we'll see like Last Whisper 3.24 Kogmaw. Like the armor ignore effect from Jinx, it still works really well with Last Whisper. So that's just one thing to keep in mind, because I did have a comment before asking about this, and I think it's a very valid question because it is confusing to a lot of players. They're like, hey, why do you build Last Whisper? Or why do you build like an Even Shroud on Olaf? That's another thing I like to do. If we add an Olaf here and look at the Even Shroud, like I didn't even check this data before. I already know it does well. And yeah, like 3.4, very nice stuff. But again, it's confusing because Twitch does give armor pen, but he just isn't reliable because he dies because he's a 1-cost unit. If you think of the first unit that dies in all your TFT games, it's normally like the 1-cost tank up front. But then after that, because they're area of effect abilities, like one of your weak people in the backline die. And then for the armor ignore on Jinx's ability, the way it just works is that it's not really an armor penetration, it's an armor ignore. So if you penetrate their armor and then ignore on top of that, they stack together, which is kind of rare in TFT because obviously Twitch's armor shred ability doesn't stack with Last Whisper. But as always leave a question down in the comments. I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. I just thought that was an interesting question that someone brought up before. And not to pat myself on the back, but this was a pretty good response to that answer. Next comp up we have is Portal Ryze. If you get +1 Portal, again, I said in the beginning, you could just hard force Portal comp. It's still good, but it's a bit worse than before because everyone's playing Ryze right now. Ryze is just one of the most popular units in the game. In terms of damage forecasts, are probably the most reliable units in TFT. But just play all the Portal units, get the Portal +1. You hit 8 Portal very easily. And there are probably like 9 or 10 different units you could use Portal Emblem on throughout the game if you include 3, 4, and 5 cost units. So pretty much all the Portal units put in your team planner. The last one you kind of flex. The best one I think is Nami, but that's only if you have a Nora on your team, which is a legendary. Hard to find Nora. But if you do get that, Nami's really good because you get 3 mages activated, and Nami is just a great CC unit in the late game. But there are a lot of other options before that. Ryze items are the same, so there's not too much to learn from there. Next comp up we have is Shapeshifter Flex. This one is going to be a very powerful comp if you get the legendaries, Briar and Smolder. But luckily you just need the 1-star versions of these units. Obviously, of course, you prefer to have the 2-star, but I would prioritize getting these units 1-star over like a bunch of 2-star forecasts. Like, yeah, Veris and Nasus are still important, don't get me wrong. If you're going for 8 Shapeshifter, getting a 1-star Briar will carry. Oftentimes, if you're playing this, you get her off the carousel if you're lose streaking. But if you're win streaking, ideally you have a lot more gold because you could use your health as a resource, sack a couple rounds, make a couple more interests, and then go to level 9, roll down for a Briar 1. If you don't hit, it's pretty devastating, but ideally if you fast 9, you at least get your forecast units to 2-star, you know? If you're doing 6 Shapeshifter, I recommend doing some sort of like Namzi build. Obviously you can't tell if you're going to be 6 or 8 Shapeshifter at the start of the game every time because you do need the extra emblem for it. But one fun comp I like to do is doing the Elise and Namzi reroll and then going to 6 or 8 Shapeshifter later on. Both are viable. It depends on how many copies of the 1-cost units you get early. And if you do get an early Shapeshifter spat, I would lean more towards the top option just because the power spike with Briar is so strong. In the early game, you also want to itemize your Shyvana. A lot of people put their Briar items on their Shyvana, but sometimes people even put AP items on Shyvana, such as like Ionic Spark, Bloodthirster, Crown Guard, things like that, because she does carry in the early game. Next build up we have is going to be the Faerie Kalista build. Just a solid comp overall. I've recommended this comp so many times this set and still do for the last patch. If you essentially built Rageblade early on and don't know what to do after that, just because a lot of people like building Rageblade early on, this is going to be the default comp to go for. Even if you don't have a Rageblade, it's still very useful to go for because you don't need many items for this comp. You just need to itemize Rakan and Kalista, so that's 4 items right there. And normally people need 6 items for their usual comp, so even if you build like a troll item in the early game that you build for value, you could still go into the Kalista comp later on. If you get a Faerie emblem, this comp becomes a lot better. Faerie's actually like one of the best performing emblems, which is surprising considering how low this comp is compared to other comps out there, but yeah, Faerie's number 3 right now, and it's mainly just because it makes the comp a bit easier to play. You could go 7 Faerie, you could even go 9 Faerie if you get another emblem, so that's another good power spike that you can get in the super late game. But just make sure you have at least 1 Rageblade on your Kalista, preferably 2, and some sort of armor penetration, such as the Last Whisper or the Even Shroud. Next build up we have is going to be Eldritch. Another one of those good forcible emblem comps. Syndra reroll is a very viable version of this. Probably my favorite one because Syndra stacking is really fun to do. But if you don't get her, and if you can't get her to 3-star, or you don't get like an early Spirit Shogun to start stacking her, the Nami version is fine too, especially if you get like School Mascot at the start of the game, or obviously like the Eldritch emblem. But just do standard leveling for the second version and 2-cost reroll for the Syndra. And of course, in your late game, you still have that Briar. And there's also a lot of different people that could use the Eldritch emblem. If you're ever looking for item recommendations or like who to put an emblem on, you could always go to teamfight.lol, head over to stats, items, Type in whatever emblem you want to look at, and like we're clicking on Eldritch this time. Like Tahm Kench is the most popular, but like there are a lot of different options. Some people like Shapeshifter, for example, if they're running Briar as like a 2-star. Oftentimes Briar is only 1-star, so that's why people prefer the Tahm Kench. Galio is also pretty interesting too. I know the average placement is a bit lower, but if you are playing around Nami, getting mages in is pretty important. So sometimes people want to put it on Galio so that they can run 3 mages with Nami. Next build up we have is going to be the Flex Karma Gwen Fiora. This used to be a very reliable comp, but not so much anymore. The only time it actually works is if you get a ton of items in your games. So in any item portal, such as like component anvils, the artifact one, the usual suspects such as Crab Rave and Scuttle Puddle, I would kind of avoid playing this comp just because you need like 50 items to make this build work. But when you do get it, it is very, very powerful. You could also circumvent that requirement by building a bunch of Thieves Gloves. It's probably one of the best Thieves Gloves comps in the game, but it's also one of my favorite comps in the game too, because it's fun to play because you can play around different carries, Karma, Gwen, Fiora, and then a tank. And there are also a lot of legendaries you could add to this to itemize up as well. And yeah, Preservers are going to be the main trait that you kind of go for. After that, Warriors. Some people do 2 Warrior, some people do 4 Warrior. Karma's thrown in there for fun. Witchcraft is sometimes used if you get Morgana, but there are a ton of different options here. That's why it has like the flex notation up there. But standard fast 8, we've been playing this comp for quite a while. Next comp up we have is Deja Vu Galio. The data is very good for Deja Vu Galio, but a lot of people don't like the comp that much because it has a lot of requirements, mainly perfect items on Galio. So you need 6 item components that are highly contested in order to make this work. And then you also need to hit 3-star Galio on top of that. That's why the other hero augments are a bit more reliable, in my opinion. And that's why they're higher on the tier list compared to Deja Vu Galio, despite the data saying Deja Vu Galio is just as powerful. Again, the reason why is because people only pick this when they are able to get perfect items. So if you're not, don't do this. But if you're on like component anvils, you can handpick your items. Maybe you're like, oh, maybe I will go Deja Vu Galio, in which case you'll perform even better than what the data says. For main tanks, people use either Rumble or Mordekaiser. Obviously, if you get 3-star Mordekaiser, it's better than 3-star Rumble because 3 is greater than 2. Complicated stuff, I know, but a lot of people don't understand that. But Rumble's easier to get, so there's that too. So since Rumble and Galio are both 2-cost units, a lot of times people just use Rumble. But if you are able to get to Mordekaiser because you don't need to add that many more units into the comp, for example, here we're just level 8, and that's without like a +1 Vanguard or +1 Mage. I find that getting Mordekaiser is pretty manageable in a lot of games. Next comp up we have is Reroll Warwick. Overall solid comp, nothing too crazy here. Obviously, without the artifact item, Corrupted Scepter, since it got removed from the game, it's not as strong, but it's still pretty good. If you get a ton of Warwicks at the start, it's definitely well worth it. And it's really good with Vanguard augments such as like Shields Up. Very fun build to play also. Next one up, Spin to Win Wukong. It's just a Jinx build, but you pick the Spin to Win Wukong augment. So we don't really need to go over that. Sugarcraft, only play this if you have both Sugarcraft emblem early and a ton of items. You know how some games we randomly get 5 items at the start of the game? Maybe those are times where you could consider going for this and then only pick item augments after that. Scuttle Puddle, Crab Rave, same story there. And they added 8 Sugarcraft to the game. So if anyone knows what the Easter egg is when you get to 8 Sugarcraft and get like a humongous cash out, please let me know because I am curious to kind of see that. But next comp up we have is Arcana Veris. Do we really need to talk about Veris? He's just like the backup 4-cost comp. You run him with Arcana, sometimes with Blaster. If you get +1 Blaster, you could do 4 Blaster. Obviously, you run 2 in the Arcana version with Rumble. But if you need a 4-cost comp and you build some IEs or AD items in the early game, this is just going to be your default. Not too many people are playing this, but it does do okay. Ryze is obviously a better 4-cost, but it's just not really a 4-cost friendly meta right now. A lot of it is mainly like hero augments, rerolls, and legendaries through Fast 9. But still viable option if you built a lot of AD items or have like very good Arcana emblems, because those are going to be extremely good in this comp. 3-cost reroll, we have Blaster Vanguard reroll with Mordekaiser and Ezreal and Hui. This comp becomes a lot better if you get a Blaster emblem because you can play 6 Blaster at level 8 essentially, because the difference between level 7 and level 8 in this comp isn't really that big without the emblems. For example, here we only see 7 units, and if you do hit level 8, you're like, what unit do I add? The answer is it doesn't really matter that much. I guess you could add like a Portal or Arcana unit. Probably going to be Arcana, maybe a Hecarim, give your team extra attack damage, but like it's not really doing that much, right? So if you do get the Blaster emblem, you go 6 Blaster, very powerful at level 8. But if not, you could just stay level 7 the whole game, get Mordekaiser 3, Ezreal and Hoi 3, and have them do the carrying. It works pretty well if you get like a little more items than you normally would in the game because you have 3 people to itemize, and Tahm Kench also uses items, but it's not quite like the Karma Gwen Fiora comp where you need like 50 items, you know? But if you are playing this, maybe pick up like 1 or 2 item augments if you're not on some item portal. But very fun comp to play, underrated I would say, and still decently viable. Witchy Walla Poppy. You could play the Ahri comp with this. It's not as good as the Lillia, but it's still solid, so it's just the Bastion Scholar comp that we saw before. There's also a Witchcraft version if you only want to play around your Poppy or if you have like no Ahri items. Build after that we have is Pyro Veris. We saw before Pyro is the best performing emblem right now, but it's just really hard to play Pyro Veris because you need Smolder 2-star. Smolder 2-star with Pyro Emblem, you will win the game no matter what. Like, look at this. Like, I didn't even look up, I promise you, I did not look up the stats before I made this video. Like, I just know Pyro Emblem has very high win rate because when you play it, you get Smolder 2, and Smolder 2, Pyro Emblem eats everything alive. Like, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's a really, like, go big or go home type of comp, and if you go home, it's really rough when you're hard stuck Varus 1-star, no Smolder, and yeah, life is not good in those cases. But if you do get everything lined up, like, this comp will win. It's kind of like an Exodia comp, because again, 2-star Smolder with Pyro Emblem eats everything up. Reroll Veigar is going to be the last comp in the A tier. It dropped down a bit just because mages just aren't as reliable as last patch. It's still good, don't get me wrong. Champion data is pretty useful for that, but Veigar used to be a bit higher on the lower end right now. Vex, same thing, but 3 cost, it's a bit weird. You can't always rely on like 3-star average placement, even with like combining it with play rates. You kind of just have to see how they play out in game, but that's why it's a bit lower on the A tier, but definitely still viable if you have like a mage opener and you can't go for Seraphine and Soraka because you just didn't get a lot of them. So this is a good backup plan for that, but that's why it's lower. It is a backup plan. It's kind of like a safety school. B tiers, we're not really going to go over too many of the B tiers because these comps just aren't really worth playing. We spent like a lot of time talking about so many other comps. I don't see why you would play a B tier comp. There are times and places for them. I'm not saying never play them. Like if you get 2 Frost emblems, like are you not going to play Frost Olaf? Like come on. It's obviously going to do well if you get 2 Frost emblems. But if you do get into a situation where that happens, like go to bunnymuffins.lol/meta and go to the Frost page if you get like 2 Frost emblems or something like that, you know? Like, but that's going to be it for me today. I'm going to skip next week because it's the last patch and I want to take a small break before set 13 comes out. But I'll definitely be making a lot of stuff in set 13. Definitely excited for that. Also excited for Arcane coming out. Gonna be watching that, so let me know if you are fans of that in the comments below. And also don't forget to check out Marvel Strike Force. Link is in the description below and in the comments section. But that's gonna be it for me today. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time.